Welcome to the People's Basics, the movement for universal basic income, universal basic services, and universal basic rights. Today on the program, we're going to be doing something a bit differently. I wanted to provide some commentary, not in the normal positive framing that I do. I am frankly infuriated at some of the absolute bullshit that we had to go through this past week for the Andrew Yang mayoral campaign for New York City, whether it be lies, blatant racism. It is too much, and it got even Andrew Yang, the constant positive warrior who tries to avoid attacking people, to call out the blatant racism against him. And so in this video, we are going to cover what that racist attack was, what Yang had said about it, and then go through not just that one attack. I want to go at every single crappy narrative that people are just lying about Andrew Yang about. And so that is what we're going to be covering today. If you agree with what we're saying and this defense of the Yang campaign, please do join the movement and subscribe. That being said, let's get into the actual meat of what was done. This past week, there was a comic that was put out by the New York Daily News that I'm going to put on the screen now for us all to look at, that was done by Bill Bramhall, a comic for them who lives in Connecticut, perpetuating that Andrew Yang is a tourist to New York City due to an interview that Andrew Yang had done with Ziwe, where he had told her what his favorite subway stop was. He instructed that it was Times Square. And he did so because, well, Andrew Yang, for the past 25 years, has lived in Hell's Kitchen within New York City. And so Times Square is his stop to get back home. And, you know, as I said, Yang very rarely will call people out. But this narrative of him not being a real New Yorker time and time again that perpetuates this perpetual foreigner trope was too much for him to stomach, especially when it finally got published as a comic in the media. And so let me read you his statement before we get into so many of those other narratives that I want to dispel with us today. So Yang wrote, "Yesterday, a Daily News cartoon was published that depicted me, or a racialized caricature clearly intended to be me, as a tourist in Times Square. The cartoon stemmed from an interview that I shared that my favorite subway stop is the one that I've used to get home for 22 years. I've seen images like this before in history books from the turn of the century and World War II. Images of Asians having beady, slanted eyes and buck teeth have been part of the American consciousness for a long time. It's grounded in a history of casting immigrants and children of immigrants as perpetual foreigners or even subhuman, a stereotype which has been used to divide and exclude people for hundreds of years. I will be the first to tell you that I'm open to different opinions and will always welcome conversations on policy. And I am a proud son of immigrants. But to paint me in the media as a perpetual foreigner to the city is wrong and subtly approves racism at a time when people are being beaten on the street on the basis of who they are. Every time you say that I'm not a real New Yorker, you are telling another Asian American that they don't belong. I've lived here for 25 years in this city. My wife Evelyn is from Queens. My children were born at St. Luke's. I'm a public school parent. Implying otherwise is the repetition of a narrative that's been used to tell Asians and Latinos and Jews and Muslims and Black Americans that we don't belong. Whether you were born here, just arrived here from another country, or are fresh out of college ready to follow your dreams, I will say clearly that all New Yorkers belong. Our city is stronger when we are united in humanity and fellowship and not divided by false narratives of who belongs and who doesn't." Now, mind you, the response that the New York Daily News made in response to Yang's criticism of their comic was that they decided to say, hey, you know what? We'll change the eyes a little bit, even though that wasn't the main complaint that they made. So they made it just, they added a little dot so it wasn't just a complete slant. And then they were like, yeah, no, we're going to keep this up. And instead, we're going to attack back by not, getting an Asian person to comment even, or, not attacking back, just, listening and saying, we're going to stick with this. But no, they decided to attack back by getting statements by a former president of the NAACP, Black woman, to try and attack back. I think her name was Nigel Hayes. I could be wrong on that first name. I apologize. But she basically responded back saying it wasn't racism. So they basically tried to use a non-Asian person to try and say, hey, no, this isn't racism. No, couldn't be. So instead of just trying to listen to them.